just being through a trauma does not mean you have anything special. It's what you do with it. And his message was always, you need to speak about it and you need to figure out how you're going to use that to make the world a better place.
The world could really use someone like Elie Wiesel right now. Someone with the moral integrity and political standing to speak truth to power, regardless of the costs. Whether browbeating Ronald Reagan about his decision to visit the Bitburg Cemetery where SS soldiers were buried, or confronting Bill Clinton about America's inaction during the ethnic cleansing in Bosnia, Wiesel never wavered in his fight against injustice and his relentless pursuit of a world free of the kind of genocide that scarred his youth. Sadly, Wiesel is no longer here to provide that kind of prophetic guidance, but in Oren Rudavsky's new film, Elie Wiesel, Soul on Fire, we do have the opportunity to spend time with Wiesel, with his wife and children, and with the teachers and students who continue to carry on his work. Told through his own words and his most eloquent voice, the film reveals the known and unknown Elie Wiesel, his conflict, his memories, and his legacy as one of the most public survivors of the Holocaust. Whether you know Wiesel's story or are discovering it for the first time, Elie Wiesel, Soul on Fire, is a moving, deeply inspirational portrait. We hope our conversation with the filmmaker encourages you to seek out this remarkable film. Director Oren Rudavsky on Inside the Art House, starting now.
Hi, I'm Greg Lumley.
And I'm Raphael Sparge.
And welcome to today's episode of Inside the Art House. We are joined today by filmmaker Oren Rudavsky, here to talk about his new film, Elie Wiesel, Soul on Fire.
Thanks so much for having me, Greg and Raphael. I'm really honored to be here.
So, I've been doing this, programming films for quite a few years, some of them with you. Actually, the timing's kind of interesting, but every once in a while, I have to confront myself and say, geez, does the audience really want another Holocaust film? And I guess I want to ask you, is this a Holocaust film or not?
It's a film about Elie Wiesel's life, and of course the key deciding moment of his life is when he and his family are taken from Sighet, Romania, where they've been living a relatively idyllic life, and taken to Auschwitz. And that is the subject of the book which he's known most for, the memoir Night. That reality colors everything in his life. And that year that he spends in Auschwitz and then in forced march to Buchenwald and then in Buchenwald is the formative experience of his life. He was only 15 years old when he was sent there, but he had a life before he was 15. And we talk about that, and he had a life,
and he had a long life
very
after.
Rich.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
I mean, he obviously, what is so profound about him, certainly at this moment, is this is a person so synonymous with speaking truth to power, who really encouraged people spoke about the sin of indifference and how it was such an urgent matter to be able to speak up in our time. It's a beautiful movie.
Well, I guess that's the first question. Yeah, it hasn't been a movie about Elie Wiesel.
There have been some films about Elie Wiesel, and I don't want to talk about them in any, there have been attempts. What has really been lacking is a film where the family has given total access. Yes. Where I've filmed people in the family, and which is not exclusively, but very much in Elie Wiesel's words. Therefore, I think I had a leg up from people who've tried to make films previously without or with semi-cooperation of the family. He is so eloquent. And so well-spoken and so passionate that he makes just for an ideal subject. And perhaps,
there's so many recordings of him speaking, and in so many different forums and in so many different platforms. And you have public and private conversations with him that are, again, very intimate. It really feels by the end of this like I knew him, which you've really accomplished this beautifully. You speak to his widow, which had to have been a sort of a huge moment to kind of get an opportunity to talk to her.
Yes, well, Marion Wiesel, who passed away this past January, the family came to us, and when I say us, came to me through Annette Insdorf and to Menachem Daum, who has been a colleague on several films which have shown at the Laemmle theaters over the years, Hiding and Seeking and A Life Apart, and I don't know if any others. We met Marion and we met her son, Alicia, and the rest of the family and filmed them all at their homes. But I told Marion, first of all, we want to make a film in your husband's own words. We want to use his voice. He will be the narrator of his own story, which is what sold her on us doing this film. Marion Wiesel, as you can imagine, Elie Wiesel was considered the softie between the two of them.
And Marion was very protective, right? Yeah.
Yes, very protective of the family and their private lives, but also very instrumental in, part of making Elie Wiesel. Like in this case, there is a woman behind the man, and she's an extraordinary presence. And her eyes, the moment I met her, I was kind of honestly intimidated by this 90-plus woman. Who looks at you, with this gaze. But I said to her, there's one interview I want to do first, and that is with you. And she was like, why with me? Do it at the end. And I said, you are going to be a key storyteller. You know the inside story, and I can't tell the story until I talk to you. I will not know how to tell it. So yes, we did that interview. It lasted 2 hours, and she said to her son afterwards, they interviewed me for 5 hours.
I'm sure it felt like 5 hours for her, right?
It felt like 5 hours to me too, but because it was very intense, and she speaks slowly and with great thought.
Very deliberate, yes, right.
Piercing thought. So it was very intense and very important. It did help shape the film.
What's the process here in terms of time frame? How many years ago are we talking about?
Yeah, not too bad. We started working on the film 4 years ago. And
that's when they approached you?
Yes, a little over 4 years. Then we had to work out, complete independence on our part in the making of the film, and that's key. Point number one for me.
Could you just talk about that? In other words, that you were not financed by anyone with an agenda? Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, totally. Right. This film, we... But
also able to provide final cut and not subject to their approval, et cetera.
Exactly. Both those things. And, the market, things are changing these days, so there are documentaries.
It's not a given anymore. The subject of a documentary isn't also the...
Oy, oy, oy. Yeah. Thank you, Prince, et cetera. Right.
Yeah, well, lots of them. I'm not sure about the Serena film or...
Yes.
There's a lot of films which are funded... anyway.
We won't say anything negative about filmmakers that do those kinds of works.
No.
For you, it was important to have the understanding that you were making the film.
And if anybody's watching and wants to give me, a few $1 million to make a film about, if it's a subject that I care about and think can be done that way, great.
So you found independent financing, essentially. You were able to gather enough sources that could sort of provide you with the kind of the artistic freedom to tell the story that you wanted to tell.
It took a while, to be honest, because even though I had some significant names, honestly, the early money came from a woman in California who I knew very tangentially, who gave me the first money. And she didn't have to do that. She just loved Elie Wiesel, and we had good rapport. And she gave me not very much, but enough to really make this happen.
To make it real. It's like that thing when you have an idea and then someone gives you money, you go like, oh, okay, it's just not an idea anymore. It's like it's moving. Yeah.
And it's what gets you into trouble because, you can't do very much until you get a certain sizable amount of money.
Right.
But, I am a filmmaker. I'm also a DP. I shot the interviews in the film along with later when I had more budget with somebody else helping because I knew, the value of that. Frankly, I went out there with my son, who's a budding filmmaker, and traveled around and interviewed people.
Oh, that's great.
And a lot of those interviews, by the way, are on the cutting room floor, or they're going to be resuscitated on the website. But it really helped me to actually not have somebody give me a whole bunch of money, but we eventually got money from Jewish Story Partners and Claims Conference, and then a big run from the National Endowment for the Humanities, which we can talk about at another time, and American Masters at PBS came in as partners, and that really secured it and made it possible really to, because, for example, I'm sure we'll talk about the animation, but the animation, hand-painted animation, is not cheap.
No.
And traveling to Israel and to Germany and to Romania and to Hungary costs money.
Yes.
And hiring crew there and all that. So,
I think it's so important to underline. What you're talking about is you get a little bit of money, enough to kind of, as you say, get yourself in trouble. And then you essentially have to kind of, necessity becomes a mother of invention as well. So you have to kind of like, all right, well, we're going to figure it out here, son, take the camera. And then you go, and then you kind of make it, you just create your own momentum, and you've sort of gathered it. And then you've sort of brought all these people on board. Clearly you're the guy to tell this, and based upon your work previously, and you again do it so beautifully. But yeah, that moment, that interview with her, really, I can see how that's a kind of a fulcrum for everything in a way.
Yeah, totally. And also with her son, Alicia. But, along the way, I spent a lot of time interviewing students of Elie Wiesel's, because Elie Wiesel considered himself in some way a teacher first and foremost. And he said, if the Holocaust never would have happened, I would have been a teacher in a little school in Romania. I don't know that that's true. Or he wanted to be
a rabbi, right? Yeah.
That's what a rabbi is a teacher. So
right. Yes, right.
Exactly.
Right.
But I don't know. I know there's certain people who are extraordinary and who come from, like Hope, Arkansas, for example. There are people who just rise. He's so eloquent and such a brilliantly creative mind, the way he speaks, the way he thinks, that I think he would have been somebody whatever had happened to him.
Oh, that's true.
But yeah, so Marion, aside from Marion, the other big struggle was finding Elie's words for various topics. And even though he was recorded extensively, what proved to be incredibly valuable were these very obscure recordings he did. We found in archives around the country and around the world, and had some surprises from people who said, oh, yes, I have recordings on this dictaphone of Elie Wiesel, which 10 years ago one could have never used because they were recorded in, not like we're recording this, but in, let's say, a coffee shop,
right.
Or, in a, where nobody was thinking about the quality of the recording, but we're able to clean things up and find them in archives. This guy, Harry Kargas, who was a professor in I think, Indiana, donated these recordings. They had never been digitized or anything. And we said, please digitize them for us. And this archivist did it very quickly. And we found these wonderful gems, which we thought we wouldn't be able to use because of the quality. But we were able to use them magically, because my editor, Michael Comet, loves technology and made that happen. So that was how we pieced the film together in Elie Wiesel's own words. And when he didn't speak about something in a way that we found interesting, we simply didn't tell that story.
Right. This idea, you're speaking about him telling his own story, this story in his own words. Let's take a look at a clip from the film so that we can illustrate, several of the things that we've been talking about just now. Here's a clip from Elie Wiesel's Soul on Fire.
Whether we want it or not, we are still living in the era of the Holocaust. The language is the language of the Holocaust. The fears are linked to it. The perspectives, unfortunately, are tied to it.
I come from a very religious background, very religious family. My dream was to become a teacher of Talmud.
We Jews in Hungary, in our ghetto, we didn't know about Auschwitz.
People try to hang on to a fragment of hope, in spite of logic. They said to one another, it's inconceivable, after all, that the Hungarians would send us all away. It immediately separated us from my mother and my sisters. I remained with my father. Everything was so fast. And then something strange happened to me. When I saw these hundreds and hundreds and thousands perhaps of Jews coming from all over Europe, speaking all languages, belonging to all cultures, to all conditions, I had the feeling this is a messianic event. The Messiah is coming.
Everything died in Auschwitz. Ideals died there. Men died there. The idea of God, the image of God changed, underwent a horrifying metamorphosis there.
It's beautiful to see this also on a big screen. Gosh, there's so much I want to ask you about.
But yeah, but you can absolutely get us out. I mean, first, we're hearing his words. He is the narrator of the film, and yet maybe not abundantly clear, but that you're piecing together different interviews and different stories, different lectures that he may have given, and putting it all together in a great stew.
Oren, can I just curious how you did this? I mean, part of this, it seems, as you were describing it anyway, is a bit of a detective story in terms of you finding people and getting things, finding lost sound elements or, archived video of him. There's enough in the public record, as it were, that one can sort of do a general survey, but clearly you went deeper. How did you construct the story? Did you go out and do these interviews and then sort of put it together on a board and then kind of try and figure out what the narrative was? Or how did you find the statue in the stone, as it were, being as that you clearly were looking for so many different things to tell it?
First of all, no film is made by one person, and I worked primarily with a very small group of people. My producers, Tal Mandil and Michael Comet, who also edited the film, and Annette Insdorf was kind of an advisor to the film. And then, of course, Joel Orloff did the animation. But in terms of it was the three of us, Tal, Michael, and I. And we, hundreds of hours. Elie Wiesel has lectures that he did at the 92nd Street Y in New York for 30 years.
Hi.
We went through those lectures. Now, we didn't use a lot from them, but we had to go through. We had to go through them. Luckily, there are transcripts of them. But even so, when you're going through hundreds, it takes a lot of time. So there was that. One guiding principle, though, that I had was, I'm not going to tell like some biopics do, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and on and on. There are a lot of chapters, significant chapters of Elie Wiesel's life that are not in this film. He was very instrumental in securing Soviet Jewish freedom in the early 60s. That story is not in the film. His Zion, talking more about his Zionism in relationship with Israel is not so much in the film. It's there implicitly in many ways, but it's not central. He was instrumental in the building of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum that Jimmy Carter started, and that's not in the film. So people are going to say, wait, why didn't you put that in the film? But we were looking for an arc to the story, and it's a personal and emotional arc. And so that's what guided us. And I said, I want to tell stories in depth. Thankfully, I've been praised for spending as much time as I did, say, on Bitburg and Reagan. Other people are like, there are always going to be people who thought it maybe too much, but most people are like, oh, I am so glad. And we found this remarkable Oval Office footage with Ronald Reagan that nobody had seen before in the Boston University archives and then in the Reagan libraries. Nobody had tried to decipher the sound in that, which was very bad. And then, I read his autobiography, which has these wonderful dreams which play a key role. The opening of the film is a dream of his about his father, and the closing of the film is a dream. And there's several other dream-like sequences in the film. And so I was like, oh my God, I love these. Luckily, he had recorded those dreams in one of his 92nd Street Y lectures.
Oh, that's great.
So
I wondered
we were
about
able.
that. Yeah, it's almost it was almost like he was broadcasting from from another dimension. I mean, it was really something.
And at the 92nd Street Y, since he's sitting at a desk and he's not somebody who, when he gives a speech, does broadcasts, he's always very quiet, so it feels intimate and personal.
Yes.
You know, there's interviews with Bill Moyers, who just passed away recently, and which are wonderful. And there's an interview he did, which I was interviewing Larry Langer, who passed away about a year and a half ago. He's a very renowned Holocaust literature scholar. And he said, in 1967, I interviewed Elie Wiesel as part of this WGBH series, and here's the DVD of it. And there were those two of those clips you just played are from that interview, and they're wonderful and wonderfully produced. So
I guess my question is, like, with everything that you had and people handing you new stuff, and how did you hold the reins? How did you know that it was in bounds or out of bounds? There's so many bright, shiny objects that you could sort of have galloped off towards, and you clearly had a sort of a vision, as you say, sort of an emotional. But what was that cornerstone for you?
The key word you used is emotional, an emotional connection, and I think as Greg knows from my other films, it's very important that I have an emotional connection, both to the subject matter, also in constructing the story intimately. It's about creating a narrative of somebody's life. Oh, another film we had at your theaters about Joseph Pulitzer also was about creating a personal narrative, which in Joseph Pulitzer's case was his blindness and how it affected him. In Elie Wiesel's case, of course, it's the trauma that he went through as a 15-year-old and the fact that he had something to hold on to from his past, which was his Jewish religious tradition and his relationship to Hasidic stories and melodies. He went through trauma that some people recover from quickly, some slowly, but for him it was a real challenge. He didn't get married till he was 40 years old. He didn't want to have a child. He did so after the age of 40, but he fell in love with that child instantly and would write him letters at the age of 3 when he would leave town. So constructing, and it's a multi-generational portrait, which is also a key clue to the film, in that you see he speaks about his grandfather and his father, and he had the key relationship with his father at Auschwitz when he was separated from his mother and sisters. And then he has this child and this grandchild, and anybody who knows Holocaust survivors, or just anybody who knows anybody, knows that relationships with children and parents are significant, either significantly good or bad, or but they're always significant.
They're deeply affected by that experience, right?
Yes. And I think you see that in the construction of the film, because his grandson Elijah takes on a role towards the end as well, and you just have a sense of family, a family that went through trauma and struggled to make sense of it, and also his personal deep connection to his father and mother, and after they're gone, it still shapes everything till his dying day.
Yeah, well, that it definitely comes through. This thing has happened to me. What am I going to do with it, and how am I going to, make the world a better place through this?
That is key, Greg. Thank you for bringing that up, because what he says in his Bitburg speech is, just being through a trauma does not mean you have anything special. It's what you do with it. It's what you do with that trauma. And I spoke to so many people, and this is how interviews that are not even in the film inform a film, because I spoke to so many people who spoke to Elie Wiesel about their trauma. And his message was always, you need to speak about it and you need to figure out how you're going to use that to make the world a better place.
Well, that's one of the really beautiful sections of the film, is also looking at teachers teaching night in schools today to kids who did not experience the Holocaust, but they have trauma in their lives or in their family history, and how they're able to use the book sort of to address those things. You know, it takes the Holocaust and Elie Wiesel's experience of the Holocaust from being a particularly Jewish story and makes it a universal kind of thing.
Thank you again, Greg, for bringing that up, because one of actually audience favorite scenes, which is only like 4 minutes long, is a scene which I shot in a Newark middle school with 13 and 14-year-old kids who are reading night with their remarkable teacher, Paris Murray.
And they're so eloquent. I mean, they're so eloquent in terms of their reflections on this story.
Crazy. And it's not because I only had that 3 or 4 minutes. They were eloquent throughout. And it was like, how do I throw out these diamonds? Because their understanding of the book, and again, I credit the teacher and the curriculum they were given. They spent 5 weeks on this. What school spends 5 weeks on a book these days? Wow. You know, they take it very seriously. And I wasn't there for 5 weeks. I was there for 5 days. Wow. I learned so much from those kids. And
I mean, what's interesting about that, of course, is that it's the carrying forward of these ideas. It's so in the spirit of being a teacher and a broadcast of ideas that then carries forward through generations. And so by doing that as a filmmaker, it just speaks to kind of the emotional core of who this man is in a way.
Yeah, totally. And you see him also. We filmed an interview. We filmed in Hungary. Again, this is how accidents happen. We filmed with this wonderful Hungarian filmmaker, Judit Elet, who is an amazing personality in her own right. But she had made a film about Elie Wiesel back in the 90s, but she had asked somebody to film Elie in the classroom. She couldn't find the film footage, but she had transferred it to Super VHS, and the quality was good enough. There was time code over his head, which we cropped out, but it allowed us, because there was very little footage of Elie Wiesel teaching in his classroom at Boston University, which he did for 40 years.
40 years, right. I read that.
Yeah. So we had this 1 hour of material, and it turned out to be terrific material and allowed us to show Elie doing what he cared about most. And he taught at Boston University, and after he won the Nobel Peace Prize, even if he was traveling around the world, he would make sure to be back in his class on Mondays to teach that class. That was how important it was to him. And there was one occasion where he had to do it via phone connection from somewhere.
Wow.
But all those students he gave personal one-on-one time with. And you get a sense of that through this student, Reinhold Bakshi, who's from Germany, who he said, I will learn as much from you as you will learn from me. And I just want to tell one more anecdote in case I forget, which is I said that Marion Wiesel died last January. Yeah. Well, we screened the film at my favorite New York theater, not my favorite LA theater, the Walter Reed at Lincoln Center.
Yes, we were just talking to them just moments ago, actually. So yes.
Oh, great. Well, it's my favorite theater, really. I mean, I like the Paris too, but the Walter Reed has great projection and acoustics.
Agreed.
And is just intimate. Anyway, the New York Jewish Film Festival is there at Lincoln Center, and Marion Wiesel came mid-January, 2 weeks before she passed, to see the film on the big screen. The kids from Newark were there. Alicia was there. And I got to tell you, if I screened it never again, that would have been a high point. And Marion said to me after the screening, number one, I wanted to stand up and say, I'm sorry, Oren, I was so hard to work with. Which she really wasn't, but she knew I knew what she meant.
She was just giving you the once over, like, you know, like, is this guy for real, right? I mean, she was clearly wanted to make sure that you were the guy.
Talk to me forever.
Yeah.
But the second thing she said was, what I truly was moved by about the film is it made me fall in love with Elie all over again.
Oh, wow, that's right.
So, you know, you can't ask for more than that.
And that part of in the movie, which is so beautiful, is that whole sense of how clearly he was so traumatized and unable to have a relationship, unable to date really or really connect in the world. I mean, you know, trauma now is such a sort of a popular word, but at the time there was nothing clearly to be able to kind of identify what he'd been through. And they met, and clearly that
he would live again.
He opened, he flowered again. That relationship is the basis of the whole next chapter of his whole life. So it was such a huge thing.
And I don't want to overpaint. You know, Elie did date people before. Let me just he struggled with you know, he would wake up at 4 a.m. and write obsessively. He was obsessive and he was traumatized, and that does not make having relationships easy.
Right.
And clearly, when he met Marion, she had come from an Eastern European background from Vienna. She had been touched by the Holocaust. She spoke French, which became his new language, and she was sophisticated, quite sophisticated woman who ended up translating many of his books after they were involved together. So again, something that's not in the film, which I regret, these, important things. You can't have everything.
Can't have everything.
But that relationship became central, and he was able to embrace it. Yeah.
I'm so happy you could show it to her, that she was there, and that what a moment. What a moment.
Well, all our lives are kind of, that question of what happens, when it happens, and why it happens, and if it didn't happen at that moment, would it have happened in the same way? But that's, the idea that he needed some time to get to a place where he could begin to, make those connections again emotionally and start thinking about it.
And that she brought something out in him and all that. Yeah, no, it was beautiful. Yeah. So you spoke about this, and we saw a little bit of it, but the animation and I'd love for you to talk about that. I'd love for you to talk about it in terms of like when you brought the animator in, how the language you used or the references that you used in order to be able to kind of really give him kind of a direction. I mean, it feels night infused by the title anyway. And then what that process was of kind of finding it through the cut.
Yeah, well, that was a big ambitious thing that became bigger and more ambitious because, first of all, one of the references is. You may know the name William Kentridge, who's a South African animator and has had a long career, uses charcoal on glass and on paper, which he erases, and you can smudge. Look him up. He's incredible. And so I was like, okay, what that evokes for me is memory, past and present, because you can erase and replace something back again, which is the way any of us who've been in therapy know. You retrace and learn something and then forget it. I said to Joel, who I'd worked with on a previous film, can we use paint on glass? And you can smudge it and mush it and pour water on it. And I said, okay, I have this. We started with this story about Elie sitting in the dark, lying on the floor in the dark in Paris, listening to classical music. We picked Beethoven's 7th Symphony, the second movement, which I knew he liked. I knew he had a record player in his room throughout his life. He had a big record collection of classical music. He loved music. And I said, let's tell that story both abstractly. There's a record player kind of in there, but there's images out his window. He lived on Riverside and 103rd Street and would look out in a studio apartment for more than 20 years of his life looking out at the river. It was a tiny apartment, but he did have a river view. Joel created these images, and we made this initial sequence with a candle flickering and his face, and I was like, this works. And then we said, well, let's tell this story about this dream of his father and drowning. The more we did, the more effective it was. We ended up with 15 minutes of animation, which is frame by frame by frame. Joel realized at a certain point that Joel would never finish this. We hired 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 animators. In the end, in the last weeks and months, it was crazy, I got to tell you, because we had to do it right. And so Joel was overseeing and doing, he wanted to do it all himself, honestly, but there was no way. We hired a bunch of students of his and colleagues of his, and they did wonderful work, which he would touch up and fix when it needed that. But that was the main and black and white, but also with some color. And it grew and grew to be a key part of the film. There's wonderful music by composer Osvaldo Golejov, who is a Romanian-born himself and a wonderful classical musician. And those elements melded together around this story of this man who also was himself early in his life was a choir master in the orphanage, and then afterwards in Paris briefly until he found his calling in journalism and writing. So an extraordinary life, and I did not want to use graphic Holocaust imagery of dead bodies, and did not. There's some strong images in the film, but that's also the animation allowed us to make abstract that which is just
suggestive, because we've all seen it so many times, right? And you being a deep, a cinematographer, DP, you being able to sort of find the language of light and or images, and must have been very exciting for him to work with you, and that's very cool that happened, and that you had that collaboration.
And people are so struck by the animation, and the film doesn't start out with like the Holocaust. It starts out in Elie's head, really, and it moves out from there, and it's very much a film inside his head, and then his actions in the outer world, which are extraordinary. Him speaking up in very polite tones to Ronald Reagan about Bitburg, which we going to visit this cemetery where SS soldiers were and trying to stop him from doing that, speaking out to Bill Clinton and many others that are not in the film. So he used his voice, both personally with his students and very much on the world stage.
It's interesting that you bring up the bit about Bitburg. We do have a clip of him speaking truth to power.
Straight up
to the face,
and in a way that is,
but respectfully, absolutely.
Yes.
No, it's so eloquent and so beautiful and shocking in its simplicity and clarity.
No one has taught us more than Elie Wiesel. His life is testimony that the human spirit endures and prevails. Memory can fail us, for it can fade as the generations change. But Elie Wiesel has helped make the memory of the Holocaust eternal. Elie, we present you with this medal as an expression of our gratitude for your life's work.
Our tradition commands us, quote, to speak truth to power. So may I speak to you, Mr. President, with respect and admiration. For I know of your commitment to humanity, and therefore I am convinced, as you have told us earlier when we spoke, that you were not aware of the presence of SS graves in the Bitburg Cemetery. Of course you didn't know. But now we all are aware. May I, Mr. President, if it's possible at all, implore you to do something else, to find a way, to find another way, another side. That place, Mr. President, is not your place. Your place is with the victims of the SS.
Yeah, when Elie says to Ronald Reagan, that place is not your place.
Yes.
I mean, that just gets to the heart of both his delicacy of how he communicates to somebody, but of the power of his words and speaking truth to power in such a public setting. That was a live broadcast on I think ABC or NBC. I don't want to get it wrong, but and you could see how intense the experience was for Elie Wiesel, because, and we use a long piece of his speech, and you can see from the beginning to end, at the end he's sweating quite profusely under the lights. And it's not just the lights, but many of us have had a moment where we've had to speak to somebody, speak our own truth to power or wanted to. And the first thing that happens is you break out in a sweat. But he held his composure so beautifully, and that really sealed his international reputation. And a year later, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, and for those who don't want to, we want to avoid partisanship here. I mean, he also did the same thing with Bill Clinton.
Absolutely.
Talking about Clinton's half-hearted efforts at trying to stop the war in former Yugoslavia.
Totally, and believe me, he spoke to many presidents, Democrats and Republicans, and he was remarkably nonpartisan. He was friends with Ronald Reagan, with Bill Clinton, with Barack Obama, with George W. Bush. He did not use his mantle to pick political sides, and he didn't do that in Israel either, which some people have criticized him for and other people have praised him for. It depends where you're coming from.
Right.
And so remarkable that way. He believed in speaking to people publicly, and when it came to Israel, in speaking to people privately.
I mean, you finished the film after October 7th, 2023. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you're not Elie Wiesel, but what would Elie Wiesel say to what is happening now, in your opinion?
Well, again, I'm not gonna speak for Elie Wiesel. He believed in the state of Israel. He believed in the importance of a state for the Jewish people as a safe haven. Unfortunately, on October 7th, Israel was not a safe haven, and it was a massacre of more Jews than have ever been massacred since the Holocaust. I think he would have certainly spoken out, and spoken out strongly, and I believe he would have spoken out both for the preservation of the state of Israel and for the humanity and of Palestinians and Jews, and the need to stop the bloodshed. And that we're all brothers of children of Abraham, and I think he would have tried to balance those things he felt very strongly and powerfully. I'm not speaking for him because I don't know, but
well, I don't think you have to. I mean, there are bits in the film where he talks about the importance of finding a just and equitable solution to the situation. You did speak to this point, in fact, maybe not specifically in a post-October 7th world, not specifically about what's happening in Gaza, but to the situation.
Yes, totally, and let's hope and pray that in coming months and years that people have enough food to eat, and that the killing stops on all sides, and that somehow we find a way to a better place. Let me just say it again in case I didn't say it well. Elie Wiesel loved Israel. Israel was very important to him. He was an ardent Zionist. He also believed in human rights and human dignity, the end of bloodshed, and all those things would have, I'm sure, informed how he would have spoken about what's going on right now in the Middle East.
Yeah, we live in such complicated times. I mean, what he stands for in terms of kind of a voice of both reason and wisdom and sort of a conduit to something that feels true and honorable and right. I have to say, there's a part of me that just sort of yearns for a voice that can sort of hold that place in a way that he does. And in a world that feels so complicated where, we don't know, facts are, it's so hard to feel cohesive about anything. And this man really stood for something. You could hear it even just from where he spoke in his voice. The place that he spoke from was so informed by his experience. And it gave it gave a sense of kind of right and wrong. I don't know. It gave a sense of kind of perspective. And we, as I say, we live in complicated times, and I yearn for what he holds,
I do too. I believe that Elie Wiesel's voice and voices like his or like a Nelson Mandela's or where are those voices? Where are those people that the vast majority of humanity can get behind? Maybe the Dalai Lama in some way. Where are those voices that we can really embrace? Because we are sorely, I know myself, but my community and my children especially are yearning for a voice of reason that they can get behind and believe in.
Right.
And it's sadly, sorely lacking in this world. There was a Rabbi Sachs in England who was a voice like that, Jonathan Sachs, who really could speak in a way that was not partisan. And Elie Wiesel was somebody you could really, hold on to for dear life in that way.
Yeah, well, I think those voices are out there, and maybe it's the media environment that finds it easier to put some clown on who's going to inflame the situation. It's easier to throw gas on a fire than to try and put it out, maybe.
That is a really good point. There are wonderful voices.
It's interesting because, as you're working on this, you're in such a world of his clarity is again what's so striking. His sense of vision and purpose and mission and his journey, his hero's journey, literally his Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is so distinct, right?
Well, I'm going to come out of this immoral situation, completely immoral and unethical situation that the world put me in, and I'm going to find that moral clarity, and I'm going to stick to it. Doesn't matter what the end is. The important thing is that, that we stick to this moral clarity. Yes. And it's going to take me where it takes me, I guess, is real. But that's what I want to get from, that's what I get from the film. That's what I'd like to get from Elie Wiesel's life and try and bring that into my own life.
And this goes back to your first question, which is, is this a Holocaust film? And it yes, of course, it's part of the story. I'm sorry I'm answering this for you, but I'm just sort of, from what you're saying is that at the end, it is a story about this man who does the right thing. And it's such an image of an important thing to embrace, I guess. Is that fair enough to what I'm saying?
Yeah, no. I think it is important to go back to that initial question: is this a Holocaust film? And I think obviously yes, but obviously it's a film about overcoming trauma and the importance of family and tradition and speaking truth to power. Elie does that in a way that doesn't smush it in your face. He does it in a way which we can all learn from because in the end, we all have to go on that journey, that hero's journey ourselves. And some of us are able to do it better than others, but that's our life goal. And so in a way, Elie's providing us with a pathway to finding that moral clarity.
And the title "Soul on Fire," of course, which is that he had to sort of walk through his internal fire to get there, right? Beautiful. Well, I couldn't say it better myself.
Now, you're going to be self-distributing the film, is that correct?
Well, no, we have Panorama Films is is distributing it, and it's going to be on America. Well, I don't want to bring up American Masters.
You can bring up American Masters. It's fine. But let's start with the theatrical.
The theatrical release is, what's nice is that in New York, it's going to open September 5th. It's going to be
Where is it opening?
It's opening at the IFC Cinema, also at Cinema Arts in Huntington.
Oh, great. And, Cinema Arts is great.
And North Shore Cinemas in Queens, and it may broaden out from there. And it's going to be in Los Angeles at the Royal and the Town 5 Laemmle Theaters.
In the theater that we're in right now. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
But that's not till October 3rd.
October 3rd, and I hope to be there. And in between, we're looking into a bunch of other cities, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Florida, Atlanta. We're working on it. I don't have a list right now. It's playing in various film festivals around the country. And then it will be eventually down the road streaming and on American Masters on PBS in 2026.
Great. Where can people get information?
Elie Wiesel Film or ElieWieselSoulOnFire.com, either of those.
This is a film to see in a theater just because you have the communal experience of having it, receiving it, feeling it, sort of taking his journey, and I imagine the Q&As that you're at will be wonderful as well. But this is definitely one to see in a movie theater.
Let me tell you that we've had at least 30 or 40 screenings of the film around the country. Most of them, nearly all of them, sold out, by the way. But the reception has been extraordinary, and especially interestingly, more recently, the audience response has been so powerful, and the questions to me have been so moving. So there is something about the collective experience. People want to talk about it, and they want to be together experiencing it. So I really think it's valuable to do that.
Yeah, look, the discourse right now it's very difficult, and I think maybe I led with that question about the Holocaust because I think we actually need Holocaust films right now at some level, because there's a narrative that tries to deny that. I mean, there's definitely a narrative that tries to deny that the Holocaust happened,
right,
or to not put what happened and the aftermath into an historical context. When we talk about occupiers, or there are people that talk about occupiers and colonists, they don't talk about refugees.
Yeah. Well, that gets, those words are very, very hot button issues.
Yeah, they're charged.
Colonizers and occupiers are very charged words in today's environment. But but we live in times where people are needing and looking for solace and understanding, and also
and for his clarity, right? His clarity.
Yes.
I mean, he has a sense of moral clarity that is so attractive at the moment, and
a Holocaust film means a film about devastation and rebirth, about the worst of humanity and the possibility of the best of humanity. And that's really what Elie Wiesel took the worst experiences that happened to him and his family and the Jewish people, and made it into a force for good in the world. And that's how many people can do that. Very few.
And again, you've captured it beautifully.
I really appreciate this dialogue, and I'm so glad you're doing this, Greg, and so glad you're having the film. And I look forward to great reception and great conversations in the theater.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, again, thank you for this. Thank you for taking this time, and it's a wonderful film, and I'm excited for more and more audiences to find it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here today. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and share and subscribe, but mostly make sure to go to Elie Wiesel Film, Elie Wiesel Soul on Fire, find out information about where the film is coming to your community and how you can see it, and make sure that people do see it. This is a film, in trying times, this is a film that maybe can point us in the right direction. And if Elie Wiesel can't be here with us to guide us through these times, personally, I think we can use his memory and his legacy and his example as a way to get through this period.
Amen.
Well said. Yeah, I am with you.
Thanks, Oren.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oren.
Our show was produced by Raphael Sparge with on-site producer Norrin Dickerson. Supervising producers are Thomas Cassetta and Miles McCreary. Our show was edited by Gabriel Emley and sound mixed by Thomas Cassetta. Our musical theme was composed by Isabel Engman and Gerardo Garcia Jr. Marketing by Gabriel Emley. Show graphics by Jenna DeAngelis. Additional marketing and web design by Stephanie Peters. Filmed at the historic Laemmle Royal Theater in Los Angeles, California. See you next time on Inside the Art House. If you like today's show, please consider subscribing to our channel to learn more on Inside the Art House.